Welcome to Geek Cross, a podcast where faith and culture intersect. I am your host, Jeremy Yoder. And on each episode, we look at a topic related to pop culture or geekdom and have conversations that use science fiction, fantasy, gaming, or comic books as a jumping off point to talk about deeper issues and to wrestle with the big questions of life. Now, every once in a while, a new TV show comes out that hits that sweet spot between love and hate. These are the kinds of shows that some people, or a lot of people, really love and obsess over. And then there's a part of the audience that hates the show and is obsessed in their hatred. This is, of course, an awesome time to watch TV and to talk about TV. I love it when shows bring out that level of passion in people because, so often TV is actually really boring. I mean, TV's gotten a lot better in the last few years, but so often it's the same warmed over characters and the same boring plot and the same boring circumstances and the same boring will they or won't they. And so it's often, I think for myself, easy to watch TV without really paying attention to what's going on. Well, right now we're blessed to have a show that managed to hit that sweet spot, that managed to be in that place where people both love it and hate it and are talking about it. And that show, of course, is the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, which was released a few weeks ago at the beginning of March on Netflix. And it's the first comic sitcom hit for Netflix that has never been available on traditional TV. Now, this sitcom, created by Tina Fey and Robert Carlock, centers around a young woman in her late 20s, early 30s named Kimmy Schmidt, played by Ellie Kemper, who 15 years ago, when she was in 8th grade, was kidnapped by the Reverend Richard Wayne Gary Wayne and forced to live in an underground bunker as the only survivors of the apocalypse. Or at least that's what the Reverend claims. Of course, it's not true. The world has gone on, and now Kimmy and her fellow victims have been freed by the local police, and they now have to figure out how to put their life together and to move on. Of course, these women are a media sensation, and they are referred to in the media as the Indiana Mole Women, and that's something that is very clearly that Kimmy struggles with and resists. Kimmy, who desires to be normal. So one day, after an interview on the Today Show, Kimmy makes a decision not to return home to Indiana, but rather to strike it out Mary Tyler Moore style in New York City and to find a new life there. Now, I need to pause before going on any further. I don't have a spoiler alarm, but I should say that there are spoilers. This is a new show. It's just come out. All the episodes for the season 1 are available, but there are spoilers. I will be talking about plot points, so the magic words, spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. You have been warned. What makes Unbreakable really interesting is that it is, on the one hand, a sunny, optimistic, cotton candy, lots of pink sitcom that has a really dark edge to it, or more accurately, it has darkness at its center. As Emily Nussbaum notes in The New Yorker, Unbreakable is a sitcom about a rape survivor. Kimmy, who survives this apocalyptic death cult, has the behavior of someone who has survived sexual abuse. Rather than dealing with this issue head-on, Nussbaum notes that Unbreakable makes subtle jokes about trauma. So, for example, Kimmy admits to her roommate that weird sex stuff happened. She flips out when men touch her from behind, or she wakes up in the morning attacking her roommate by trying to choke him, or washing a knife in the shower and has no idea how she got there. Now, those last two, of course, are exaggerations, but there is this sense that Kimmy is dealing with something dark, something difficult, something traumatic, and the show never goes out and spells out what this is. It always is simply hinting at it. Nussbaum notes that Unbreakable has elements of recent tabloid stories. It's the kinds of stories that we see in the news, that we hear about, that seem so horrific. For example, of course, Elizabeth Smart, who a number of years ago was kidnapped out of her bedroom by a crazy person who believed that he was a messianic figure. Or the case of Katie Beers, who was abducted from her abusive family and actually kept in a bunker. Or finally, the case of Ariel Castro, who kidnapped and kept captive 3 women in his Cleveland home. This is not exactly the kind of material that people normally make comedies about. And Unbreakable has the same sort of characteristics of a Tina Fey show, in that it has very broad sense of humor, absurdist humor, makes very absurdist kinds of jokes, but every once in a while it will hit the satirical bullseye. The show pokes at our media obsession, our love of news and media, about these horrible kinds of things, and the way that we take human tragedy and we turn it into a viral video. Unbreakable is also about dislocation. That the kind of dislocation that many of us experience when we leave home, when we leave our families, when we leave our communities of origin, and we go out into the wide world. Kimmy moves to New York City, and she has lost the last 15 years. So there is something about her that seems off. There's something about her that doesn't quite fit in. She's playing catch up. And so she'll make references to pop culture that's completely out of date, that doesn't fit, that doesn't make sense. She acts in ways that sometimes seem absolutely bizarre, and it's very clear she doesn't always understand the culture around her. I think what makes Kimmy such a wonderful character is that she has this spirit. These horrible things have happened to her. These horrible things that the show only hints at, of being locked up in this bunker with other girls, being told that she is worthless, being told that the world outside is unsafe, that they will die if they open the hatch of this bunker. And yet, she overcomes that experience. She has this unbreakable spirit that leads her to seek a better life for herself from nothing. And she has also this anger that leads her to pursue justice, go to whatever length she has to put the Reverend into jail. Emily Nussbaum, again of The New Yorker, compares Kimmy to Leslie Knope from Parks and Recreation, this spirit of optimism, this drive to look at the good things in life. Except, as she notes, Kimmy is a Leslie Knope who has been to hell. Nussbaum points out that Unbreakable is the latest of a series of shows that include themes on sexual violence against women. Shows like Mad Men, House of Cards, American Horror Story, and of course, the least happy fantasy kingdom of them all, Game of Thrones. But as Nussbaum points out, that if television is going to take women's experiences seriously, it will include stories of sexual violence. By not dealing with the show's darkness directly, Unbreakable avoids the pitfalls that often happen when dealing with these kinds of themes. Often, depictions of rape and sexual violence against women in movies and in TV end up eroticizing the rape. There's something about it that is titillating. And of course, as a sitcom, Unbreakable does not actually show us any of these horrible things. But there's subtext. They're there. And they explain why Kimmy acts in certain ways as she struggles to understand the world around her and to put her life back together. Now, as I said, the show is not universally beloved and has brought out debate over the depiction of minorities. There are a number of characters in Unbreakable that are problematic. One of the problematic characters is Kimmy's gay black roommate named Titus Andromeda, played by Titus Burgess, who in a lot of ways embodies every stereotype about black gay men than anybody's ever thought of. But he's also a real character, a real person in this show who carries his own storyline, is, I think, a fully realized character, and that helps with some of the stereotypes. A much more problematic character is Jacqueline Voorhees, who's played by Jane Krakowski, and she is a Native American, a Sioux, who is passing herself off as white. So here we have a white actor playing a Native American character passing as white. And certainly, I think at this age, in 2015, when we are so concerned about representation, this is a problematic character. A wrinkle in all of this is that Indian Country Today posted a positive response to Jacqueline by Native journalist Johnny J., who pointed to Jacqueline's interactions with her parents as authentic representations of conversations that happen often in Native families in regards to relating with a white dominant world. The final problematic character is the illegal Vietnamese immigrant math tutor and love interest, Dong, played by Ki Hong Lee. And Dong is portrayed positively in the show, but also stereotypically. He's good at math, he speaks broken English, and he has been compared to the infamous Long Duck Dong in John Hughes' 1984 comedy 16 Candles. Hopefully, as the show continues, it might give us some surprises about Dong. I think one of the bigger questions I have, though, about the show is that what does it say about origins? New York City in the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt is this place, this cosmopolitan place that people have come to escape to recreate themselves, to become new people, to live new lives. And in some ways, I think the show suggests that where we come from is something that we have to escape. Kimmy escapes from the traumatic and abusive experience of being locked up in the bunker. She escapes from Durnsville, Indiana. Jacqueline escapes from the reservation in South Dakota. Titus escapes from a marriage in Mississippi. And Dong escapes from whatever he has experienced in Vietnam. Most of us struggle with our childhoods. Most of us struggle with where we come from. As writer Flannery O'Connor famously wrote, quote, "Anybody who has survived his childhood has enough information about life to last him the rest of his days." Unquote. Part of becoming an adult is making peace with that childhood. Clearly, at this point, Kimmy has not yet made peace. What Kimmy has been able to do is overcome her past. What Kimmy has been able to do is seek justice in her past. But certainly, as a character at the end of Season 1, Kimmy is still not at peace. Kimmy is excited by the possibilities. Kimmy is happy that the Reverend is going to jail. But at this point, she has not yet made peace. In contrast, part of what the character Jacqueline experiences at the end of Season 1 is a move towards a recapturing of her Lakota heritage. Jacqueline is currently experiencing divorce, and she's on the way to the court in Durnsville, Indiana, to support Kimmy. At a rest stop, a school bus stops, and out comes a marching band named the Indians with a Native American caricature as its mascot. And Jacqueline is so enraged by this, she goes up and she begins to beat this mascot. And all of a sudden, a rival team comes out and they get involved in the fight. And their mascot is a wolf, which has special significance to the Lakotas. As positive as Jacqueline's embrace of her heritage might be, I don't think that fixes the problems of the show and the questions that it raises. As a pastor and a Christian, I also have to say I was a bit uncomfortable with the depiction of religion in the show. I have to confess, at the beginning of Unbreakable, I grimaced a little bit when I realized that Kimmy and the other Indiana Mole women were wearing dresses inspired by the prairie-style dress. This is the style of dress that the FLDS, one of the polygamous break-off groups from the Mormons, require their women to wear. And as a Mennonite who also has plain conservative dress in my own background, I feel a little bit uncomfortable using this kind of dress as a shorthand for religious oppression. Certainly, I am not a conservative Mennonite. There are issues in the conservative Mennonites, especially in how it treats women, but I also know that not all women who dress plain, who dress modest, do so because they're oppressed. It's a very complicated thing that at some point perhaps we'll need to talk more about on Geek Cross. But I also, as a pastor, was uncomfortable with the character of Richard Wayne, Gary Wayne, played by John Hamm. I know there are lots of negative depictions of pastors in pop culture. Most depictions of pastor in movies or TV are negative. There's actually a kind of trope out there known as the sinister minister. The pastor who is weird, the pastor who presents a good side, presents something well, but actually has sinister ambitions. And the character here, the reverend who runs this cult, he takes on that kind of trope. And when I see this kind of trope, I always have this sort of instinctive reaction where I want to say, hashtag not all pastors. But I think what really bothered me about the Reverend was that, he was presented as a cartoon villain. This is not a character with a lot of depth. Kimmy has depth, Titus has depth, Jacqueline has depth, but this menacing figure has no depth. He comes into court, he's a smooth operator, he essentially seduces the entire court until Kimmy stops him and proves that he was not sincere in his prediction of the apocalypse. And yet I can't help feeling that I wish there was more to this character, this fictitious colleague of mine, than just simply the cartoon cardboard cutout that Tina Fey has given us. I think in a show like this, it's okay for people to have different opinions. Overall, I really like the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. I think Kimmy is a fantastic character. In Kimmy Schmidt, we have a hero who, through her own sense of self and her own sense of right and wrong and a sense of justice and her joy and her optimism and her own strength, overcomes the worst kind of darkness that we often see around us. But it is a problematic show. And sometimes comedy is problematic, and I think it's okay to be offended by things. But at the same time, because Tina Fey is a smart writer, and I think is aware of some of these issues, I think it's also okay to laugh at some of the jokes, while at the same time knowing that we have to have conversation about the role that these things play in our society. We have to understand the tropes that are in our culture, the shorthands about characters, when we treat people not as full people, but as stereotypes, using lazy shorthands to get at the character. It's only the first season, and the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt doesn't quite get there yet. But shows often take a little bit of time to really find their groove. So I'm looking forward to season 2. If you like Geek Cross, please help us out and leave us a review on iTunes. You can find Geek Cross on Facebook and Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @GeekCrossShow. You can email us at geekcrossshow@gmail.com. Geek Cross is a McLaren production. I'm Jeremy Yoder. Thanks for listening.